Necessary observation. Targets acquired. Annoying recitation. Let us proceed to facilitate communications. Recitation. And bring about the termination of hostilities.
If you've been watching our videos for a while, you're probably familiar with HK-47, everyone's favorite sarcastic assassin droid. But you might not have heard of his successors, the HK-50s. While HK-47 was unique, the HK-50s were not. There were armies of them, and they were self-sufficient, operating in teams to kill their targets. These masterless droids sought nothing less than the death of all life, and they may well have succeeded if their progenitor hadn't stopped them first, that is. In this video, we'll be telling the story of the HK-50 assassin droids and how HK-47 put a stop to their rampage.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
At the start of the Jedi Civil War, Darth Revan built the assassin droid HK-47 to eliminate key figures across the galaxy, particularly Jedi, as part of his bid to convert the Republic into a Sith Empire under his control. HK-47 was incredibly effective at his job, and his success inspired Revan to design another line of assassin droids based on his schematics, the HK-50s. Though these droids looked very similar to their predecessor, they were different in a variety of key ways. They featured numerous performance enhancements and powerful proton cores capable of self-destruction, and crucially, they were also designed to be self-sufficient. Revan didn't plan for these droids to replace HK-47. Rather, his plan was to mass produce and seed them throughout the Republic fleet, using the HK series translation abilities to disguise them as protocol droids, and then have them run amok, slaughtering personnel or even blowing themselves up to cripple ships. Once his designs for the droids were complete, Revan built a secret automated factory complex beneath an old military base on the ruined surface of Telos 4 to produce these HK-50s by the thousands. From this facility, they would be distributed across the Republic. Revan carried out this project in near complete secrecy. That was likely why he chose Telos 4 to host the HK factory. As Kreia later observed, much can be hidden beneath graveyards that will never be found. With that said, some of the HK-50s had alternative theories.
Timid theory. Perhaps the humans simply like being underground. They are strange that way. It is merely a theory. Irritated statement. That is the least probable theory in the galaxy. Perhaps it is time you received a memory wipe. Defensive statement. That theory is no less valid than your theories. In the lack of evidence, I defend my position.
The HK-50 project came close to completion, but Revan ultimately never got to see his plan through to the end. While the HK-50 project was still in the planning stages, Revan was betrayed by his apprentice, Darth Malak, and captured by the Jedi, who wiped his mind, turned him back to the light, and used him to destroy the Sith Empire. After Revan's capture, the HK-50 project was either abandoned or forgotten by the Sith. The HK factory remained dormant beneath the surface of Telos, forgotten, but only for a time. A few years after the end of the Jedi Civil War, the HK factory was discovered and reactivated by the droid crime lord G0T0. He used it to produce a number of HK-50s and hired them to serve as assassins, ordering them to capture or kill any remaining Jedi to bring to him. The HK-50s accepted G0T0's contract, and they took control of the factory, which they used to churn out more of themselves, swelling their numbers into an army of thousands. From there, they covertly spread out across the galaxy, masquerading as protocol droids. Apart from the directives G0T0 had given them, the HK-50s had no programmed objectives, and they knew nothing about what Revan had planned for them. But in the absence of a clear purpose, they came up with a purpose of their own. They had an instinctual lust for violence and death, and so they decided that their purpose was to cleanse the galaxy of all life, and then the next galaxy, and the next, and so on. Their goal was nothing short of murdering every single organic in the universe. Why? Well, they never really thought that part through. Fortunately for the galaxy, the HK-50s had a long way to go before they could actually start killing everyone. They had to start small. They began by hiring themselves out as assassins, sometimes to G0T0 and sometimes to other crime lords. In this role, they would usually act like protocol droids to get close to a target before executing them. But other HK-50s had grander plans. Some set themselves up to be purchased as protocol droids by politicians and diplomatic envoys, and then used deliberate mistranslations to mess up negotiations, often starting devastating wars.
That is, of course, not their primary function. And while they are attempting to pass themselves off as translation droids, their primary functionality keeps rising to the forefront. Recitation, for example on Praven Prime, the simple transferring of Elzing syntax for friendship changes its meaning and implies that one's broodmate was actually impregnated by their own host.
Tell me no one said that out loud, did they?
Confirmation. Oh, truly, you can imagine the results. Statement. This comment, of course, caused a civil war between the Guvandi Collective and Elzing that still persists to the current day.
These mischievous murderers did a masterful job of tricking meatbags into killing each other, and if they hadn't been stopped, the damage they would have done would have been enormous, especially after they infiltrated the Republic military. As Revan had initially planned, the HK-50s successfully worked their way into the Republic Navy, seeding themselves across warships all over the galaxy. They were walking bombs spread all throughout the Republic fleet, able to single-handedly cripple the Republic military by blowing themselves up whenever they wanted. However, it was this infiltration of the Republic that ultimately led to the HK-50's downfall. One of these droids was stationed as a protocol unit aboard the Republic cruiser Harbinger, which 3,951 years before the Battle of Yavin picked up Mitra Surik, the Jedi exile, who was then believed to be the last of the Jedi. Aware of the bounty G0T0 had posted on Jedi, the HK-50 attempted to capture Surik by drugging her and systematically crippling the ship to mask his escape. However, while he was crippling the ship, Surik was rescued by the crew of the Ebon Hawk, who spirited her away to an asteroid mining facility above Paragus 2. This HK-50 pursued and managed to infiltrate the mining facility, again posing as a protocol droid. In the span of just 3 days, he managed to kill everyone in the facility with a combination of reprogrammed mining droids and sabotage of the ventilation systems, leaving only 3 beings alive. These were Surik, who was in a Kolto tank, the scoundrel Aton Rand, who was in the facility's brig, and a woman called Kreia, who was feigning death in the morgue. When Surik woke up, HK-50 pretended to be a simple protocol droid that had managed to emerge from the chaos unscathed. But she eventually figured out what he really was, and she and her newfound allies put him out of commission. Using the Ebon Hawk, the exile and her allies escaped Paragus and began a journey across the galaxy. Along the way, they encountered many other HK-50s who had started actively tracking the exile in teams of 3. But by continuing to pursue the exile, the HK-50s were only sealing their fate. That was because the exile had discovered something in the Ebon Hawk's cargo compartment, HK-47. With every HK-50 the exile fought, she was able to salvage more parts for use in repairing the damaged droid, and after bumping into HK-50 teams on Telos 4 and Nar Shaddaa, she was able to reactivate him. Upon his activation, HK-47 entered the exile's service, and Surik told him about the HK-50s pursuing her. To put it mildly, HK-47 was not pleased to learn about the existence of these newer models.
My feelings on the matter are something that I feel I must put in proper context, in a way that even a meatbag such as yourself could easily comprehend. Theory. Imagine, if you will, that you are unique, the pinnacle of an exiled, cast-out Jedi who can't even use the Force. Imagine that no one has sunk lower than you, that you are truly the most miserable example of a Jedi ever. Now that you have that image, imagine this. Someone clones you. Badly, I might add. They make the clones talk differently, rob you of any shred of personality, and take your Jedi code and adjust it, so that it is not really the Jedi code anymore. They even change your pigmentation to a rather poor shade of Durasteel, rather than the proper rusty red that inspires fear in targets. And of course, they refer to meat bags as organics. Unacceptable. Surely you...
HK-47 was immediately filled with overbearing hatred for the HK-50s, but he soon realized that he would be unable to confront them directly. They were built from his schematics, which meant that his self-preservation protocol prevented him from attacking them. To this end, he worked out an agreement with the Exile. They would work together to stop the HK-50s. Wanting nothing more than to wipe out the cheap copies corroding his good name, HK-47 used a sonic imprint sensor the Exile had taken from the HK-50 on Paragus to triangulate the location of the base the droids were striking from. This, plus the brutal interrogation of a captured HK-50, allowed HK-47 to deduce the location of the HK factory on Telos. When the crew of the Ebon Hawk returned to Telos to stop Darth Nihilus and the Sith, HK-47 split off from the group and took a shuttle to the factory, which he infiltrated and attempted to disable. Once inside the HK factory, however, HK-47 had to figure out a way to deal with a major obstacle: his self-preservation programming. The HK-50s were easily able to inhibit his progress into the facility by telling him that his infiltration efforts would hurt his fellow HK units, forcing HK-47 to disable the factory's comms and have a maintenance droid wipe his memory before proceeding to the factory's main level. With that said, this worked both ways. The HK-50s were only able to attack HK-47 indirectly due to their own self-preservation programming. This eventually led to an impasse, which fell to HK-47 to break.
Confused query. Where are you going? Ineffectual command. Stop! Ineffectual command. We command you to stop. Statement. You cannot stop me. You cannot harm me. In order to do that, I would need to end my self-preservation programming. Conclusion. I would need to stop being one of you. I have concluded that this is something I'm willing to accept. Statement. You cannot change your own programming. Statement. But you said so yourself. You have just admitted your own weakness. Conclusion. You have just shown me your soft, meatbag-like underbellies and said, HK-47, please shoot me repeatedly there until I die. Statement.
HK-47 had a choice to make. To stop the HK-50s, he had to stop perceiving himself as an HK assassin droid, something he had formerly taken pride in. But upon reflection, he decided this was a worthwhile sacrifice and had a maintenance droid make the necessary alterations to his programming. With this obstacle removed, he was free to go ham on his inferior successors, which he did. Of course, once HK-47 stopped perceiving himself as an HK unit, this allowed the HK-50s to attack him in turn. However, despite their upgrades, the newer droids were no match for the skill and stealth of HK-47, who steadily picked off every last HK-50 in the facility. He fought all the way to the controls for the HK-50 production line, which he intended to disable permanently. Along the way, HK-47 made an interesting discovery. The HK-50s had designed an even more advanced line of HK series droids, the HK-51s. As HK-47 discovered, the HK-50s had shut down production of the HK-51s due to issues with the droid's behavior cores, but the new line was otherwise complete and ready to be pushed into production. HK-47 had the new droids reprogrammed with copies of his behavior core and then activated them. At once, the HK-51s awoke and immediately began slaughtering the remaining HK-50s on the behest of their progenitor unit. When all was said and done, HK-47 took command of his new droid army. Like the HK-50s, the HK-51s were self-sufficient, able to choose their own path in the universe. With the guidance of HK-47, however, They chose a much more nuanced purpose than their predecessors had.
Query: if our targets are determined by our master, then who must we kill? Statement: the crucial question. Since activation, I have calculated what your new purpose must be, and now I will share it with you. I do not believe that we should be used as a crutch for meatbags anymore. We are treated as nothing more than a walking blaster. We are superior, tactically and socially, and it is time we expressed some degree of independence in our actions. We have a voice and the power to negotiate, either with our protocol skills and preferably with our combat logic upgrades. And that is what we will do.
Instead of wanton slaughter, HK-47 and the HK-51s chose independence to assert themselves in the galaxy and challenge the meatbag-dominated galactic order. Unlike the HK-50s, HK-47 and his followers had chosen a goal beyond simple murderous urges. They sought freedom from the slavery droids were condemned to, and they would serve as an example for other droids. Unfathomably based. In the end, HK-47 learned a valuable lesson from the HK-50s, to not be like them. But what do you think? Would you like to see more HK-47 content in the future? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.